Okay, back on the bite. This is Nick Marenoski and with Michael Sema, and today we're going to talk about seller's concession.
Oh yeah.
Conceding.
Well,
Concessions?
Concession. Seller's concession.
Concession.
Concessions?
Credits. Credits from the seller.
So what is seller's concession? Seller's concession is credit from the seller to you for your closing costs. That's it. It's plain and simple. A lot of people don't know about it in the beginning stages, especially home buyers, and they don't use it to their advantage, especially sometimes if they do need it. But we're going to give you a couple examples today. We're going to talk about how to bring up seller's concession to save you money up front, or how to negotiate with the seller during even the inspection period to try to save some money. So seller's concession, when it comes to negotiating with the seller, as long as the seller is getting what they want, there's a way of structuring a concession in there to save you on the upfront cost that you would have to incur to pay for the closing cost.
Outside of your down payment, right?
Outside of your down payment. Mm-hmm. So when you purchase a home, down payment's one of the upfront costs.
Yep.
Closing cost is another upfront cost. Closing costs could average about 2.5% to 3% of a purchase price. So on a $300,000 purchase price, closing costs could be all the way up to $9,000. Typically, a buyer comes to the closing table with this money. Now, a really good way of saving this upfront cost is to build the seller's concession and to negotiate one with your seller through your agent or through your attorney. Yeah. The way that it works is we recommend first negotiating on a price. Let's say a seller is selling their house for $300,000. You negotiate a price down to $280,000. Seller's okay with it. They accepted the offer. You could go back to the seller and say, okay, seller, now that you've accepted the $280,000, we would like the purchase price on the contract to be $290,000. And that additional $10,000 will give you credit for the closing costs at the closing table. Sellers don't care, right? At the end of the day, they get their $280,000. And the additional $10,000 could be used for your attorney fee, your title insurance, your property taxes, homeowners insurance, lender commitment fees, third-party fees that are really associated with closing a purchase transaction.
It's also called financing the closing costs, and you may have heard that term before. It's essentially paying slightly more for the home or negotiating a purchase price for the home to also include the percentage, sometimes around up to 3% or an exact dollar amount, to provide you back so you don't have to come up with that additional money at the closing table. Your payment ends up being slightly higher because you're paying a little bit more for the home, but for most people that are on a tight budget, this ends up being the right way to go.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially if there's some type of cosmetic work or structural work or any type of repairs that need to be done to the house. It's tough saving a big down payment or even a small down payment, but they'll also come up with the closing costs on top of that. Buyers typically don't even know most of the times what those closing costs could be.
Yeah, a good lender will tell you at the pre-approval stage exactly what you need to put down as a percentage, what your price range is, and it should also itemize what your estimated closing costs you're expected to be, so you have a total out-of-pocket figure.
Right.
And a lot of times people don't think about when they're saving for a down payment or whatever money they have, they don't necessarily know exactly how much those closing costs are going to be, so they can come up to a little bit of a surprise sometimes when they talk. Sometimes they could be lower, sometimes they could be higher, depending on where they're buying, what the taxes are in those neighborhoods.
Right.
But it should be represented to you that you have this option, because most people don't realize $10,000 in a mortgage payment, it can be around just $50 a month.
Yeah.
But $10,000 out of their pocket can mean a big difference between
$10,000 out of your pocket.
Yeah. So it's just like if I can have the seller, if I can pay $10,000 more for the home and the seller pays for my closing costs, well, that's $10,000 more in my pocket. Maybe my mortgage payment changes $40, $50 a month, but I'm okay with that because it still fits within my monthly budget. But that I'm gonna feel that difference at the table, at the closing, and then maybe that money can be used to, rehab the bathroom or do some work that I wanted to do,
security,
or even just have that cash in your pocket, because you have to have a little bit left over. You don't want to go in with with everything that you've saved up, every dollar, and put it at the closing. So, seller concession is one of those things that's really good. The benefits are that you're essentially financing the closing costs. You're not coming up with those extra amount of closing, but there are some cons to it. and we're going to go through that now. What are the cons to a seller concession?
Well, the problem is when you bring up a seller's concession to sometimes agents that don't really know too much on how to structure it, or even sellers at the wrong time, it could be a turnoff. It could be something that to them that they might not want to entertain, especially if there's a lot of offers on the table.
Yeah.
If they're already concerned about the value of the property coming in at the asking price, a lot of times the seller might not want to agree to a seller's concession or a higher purchase price because the value during the appraisal period could come in lower, and it could really just kill the overall deal. But
yeah, so what you're saying is that not only it has to be priced right so that it includes the seller concession, that it's not overpriced, but also the seller could get a look at your offer and maybe compare to another offer that's not asking for it, and look at it in a standpoint of maybe this client isn't as qualified because they're asking for the seller concession. So the drawback sometimes is that it doesn't look like you are putting that much out of your pocket, and then maybe not look as strong of an offer with someone at the same price as
if it's in the beginning stages of the offer itself. But a seller's concession during the negotiation period of, let's say, an inspection report coming back that there's damages to the property and you want to renegotiate, this is a really important time where you can bring up seller's concession. So let's say, for example, you hire an inspector that comes out to the property and they find, I don't know, $10,000, $15,000 worth of damage, and you want to renegotiate with the seller on giving you some type of credit, either dropping down the purchase price of the home and selling it to you for a cheaper price, or giving you a seller's concession. And this is typically when seller's concession does pop up, is during the inspection period. So during the inspection period, it's okay to bring it up because at the end of the day, you guys already agreed to a certain purchase price and a certain down payment, and they weren't aware of certain things and conditions
issues that
with
may
the
have
house.
come up during an inspection, and now you can kind of negotiate that, and so that instead of reducing the purchase price by the amount that you've negotiated with the seller based on any kind of inspection issue that come up, you can have it directly affect your pocket. So let's just say, for example, something is the house is being sold as is, but maybe something is not brand new. The roof might need to be replaced in a certain number of years. So maybe you negotiate a slight credit for that. That credit can be applied directly at closing to affect your closing costs, and then you don't have to come out of pocket with that amount. So it's essentially like giving you the money up front instead of reducing the purchase price, which you would barely feel because it'll just change your payment slightly, but not really help you if it's something that you need to end up taking care of after the closing.
Yeah, and typically a lot of times sellers sometimes might agree to do the work and fix up the repairs and have the buyer re-inspect the property if they don't want to do a seller's concession because they're maybe concerned about the value of the property coming in a little bit lower. But remember, it exists, and you can use it either in beginning stages of negotiating with a purchase price, or towards the middle and really just getting some type of credit that you don't have to come up with all that cash at closing, because 3% is a lot of money of a purchase transaction, and it's a lot of us aren't prepared for it, and that's really the biggest mistake a lot of home buyers are making in the beginning stages is they just save enough for the down payment, and then when they find out how high the closing costs are, it really messes things up. But there's a solution, seller's concession, and if your real estate agent is really good at negotiating, they'll know exactly how to negotiate it, meaning start with the purchase price first, and then bring in the seller's concession. Instead of putting in an offer with the seller's concession in the beginning stages, they could throw things off a little bit. There's different ways of doing it. But yeah, seller's concession, pretty simple to understand. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free, you could always reach out to us. But good luck.